The 30th doctor closed Maren Whitlock's medical file and used the same careful voice the other 29 had used before him. We have reached the limits of what the evidence can tell us. Rain moved against the library windows of Whitlock House in long silver lines. The fire burned behind a brass screen. 6 specialists sat around the polished walnut table surrounded by scans, laboratory reports, neurological assessments, genetic panels, and 2 years of unanswered questions. Maren remained at the head of the table in her wheelchair. She wore a dark blue suit with a high collar. Her black hair was pinned neatly behind her head. Her hands rested motionless in her lap, except for the thumb rubbing slowly over a small brass bird she carried almost everywhere. "What does that sentence mean?" she asked. Dr. Paul Renner adjusted his glasses. "It means we cannot identify a structural, autoimmune, infectious, genetic, or metabolic explanation that accounts for the full pattern. That was not my question." The room became still. Maren's voice had not risen. It rarely did. "What does it mean for me?" "Doctor," Renner glanced at the neurologist beside him before answering. "It means further testing may cause more harm than benefit." "So you are stopping?" "We are recommending a different approach. A psychiatric approach. A functional neurological evaluation." Maren's expression did not change. Across the room, her chief operating officer, Elliot Blaine, looked down at the table. He had been engaged to Maren once. Now he managed her company, her calendar, most of her medical appointments, and nearly every conversation in which another person attempted to describe her future. "Doctor," Renner continued, "this does not mean your symptoms are imaginary." "No," Maren said. "It means you believe they are real only to me." "That is not what I said. It is what you prepared everyone else in this room to hear." No one answered. Near the library door, Jonah Reed knelt beside a portable air monitoring case and tried to make himself invisible. He had been inside Whitlock House for less than an hour. He was not a physician. He was not part of the consultation. He had been hired by the estate's insurance carrier to inspect the mansion's ventilation, heating, emergency power, and environmental control systems before the policy was renewed. The contract was supposed to last 4 days. Jonah needed it to last all 4. His checking account contained $83. The transmission in his van slipped whenever it shifted into 3rd gear. His 8-year-old daughter needed a new winter coat, and the landlord had stopped calling the past due rent a misunderstanding. Jonah had been instructed not to interrupt the medical meeting. He had not intended to. Then Maren's right hand began to shake. It started in the fingers holding the brass bird. Her shoulder tightened. Her breathing shortened. One of the nurses stood immediately. "Maren?" "I am fine." Her voice came slowly. The words were correct, but the space between them had widened. Elliot pushed back his chair. "Get the oxygen." "I do not need oxygen." Her left arm dropped from the chair's support. The nurse reached her first. Maren's eyes remained open, but her focus slipped past the people around her. Her head tilted. Her body seemed to lose its instructions one piece at a time. The doctors moved quickly. Blood pressure. Pulse. Pupil response. Glucose, oxygen saturation. Questions Maren could hear but could not answer. Jonah watched the fire. Then the ceiling vent, then the narrow line of soot above the brass screen. He looked at the reading on his portable monitor. Normal, almost the number shifted. Then returned. Elliot noticed him standing. "This room needs to be cleared." Jonah closed the equipment case. He reached the door, then stopped. Maren had begun recovering. Her fingers moved. Her breathing steadied. "Doctor," Renner asked whether she knew where she was. Maren stared at him with open contempt. Jonah looked at the rain beyond the windows, then at the library, then at Maren. He asked the question before he could talk himself out of it. When was the last time this happened somewhere that wasn't this house? Every person in the room turned toward him. Elliot's face hardened. "Who are you?" Jonah ignored him. Maren looked directly at Jonah. Her speech had not fully returned. "What?" When was the last time your body failed like this somewhere else? Doctor, Renner stood. This is not an appropriate time. Jonah nodded. It is a simple question. It is medically irrelevant. Then she should be able to answer it. Maren's fingers tightened around the brass bird. Her eyes moved toward the window. Jonah waited. The nurse waited. Even Elliot stopped speaking. Maren's voice returned in a whisper. I don't know. Jonah did not move. She looked at him again. No, she said. The room remained silent. Maren swallowed. It hasn't. That was the moment the impossible case began to crack. Not because Jonah Reed knew the answer. He did not. He had no diagnosis, no medical degree, and no right to challenge 30 physicians. But for 2 years, nearly everyone had asked Maren what happened inside her body. No one had asked where it happened. If this mystery already has you questioning what everyone else overlooked, tap like and tell me who taught you to keep asking when the easy answer did not feel true. Elliot removed Jonah from the library himself. He did not touch him. He did not need to. Elliot Blaine was 42, tall, controlled, and dressed in the quiet, expensive way of men who preferred power without visible effort. You were hired to inspect the building. Elliot said once the library doors had closed behind them. That is what I was doing. You interrupted a private medical consultation. She had an episode in a room I was inspecting. You implied the house is causing her illness. I asked whether the episodes happen elsewhere. You are not qualified to interpret the answer. No. Then you understand why your opinion is unnecessary. Jonah picked up his equipment case. My opinion is unnecessary. The answer is still useful. Elliot stepped closer. Maren has been examined by specialists in 5 states and 2 countries. Then one of them should have asked. You think 30 doctors missed something you noticed in 40 minutes? Jonah looked toward the library door. I think people miss things when everyone begins with the same assumption. And what assumption is that? That the problem is inside her. Elliot's jaw tightened. The problem is inside her. Maybe? There is no maybe. Jonah had spent 13 years inspecting industrial ventilation systems, hospital air handling units, underground utility rooms, chemical storage facilities, and factories where a failed fan could injure 20 people before anyone smelled anything unusual. People trusted machines because machines were measurable. Jonah had learned that measurements could lie when they were taken at the wrong time, in the wrong place, or after someone had changed the conditions. Has she lived here the entire time she has been sick? He asked. That is none of your concern. Has she? Elliot studied him. Maren was injured at work 26 months ago. What kind of injury? A fall. Here? At the company's research facility. And after the hospital, she returned to this house. Has she spent more than a few nights away? She has had hospital admissions. Did she have episodes there? Elliot's expression shifted, only slightly. Jonah saw it. You need to leave, Elliot said. My contract is terminated. You do not represent the insurance company. I represent Miss Whitlock. Does she know that? The library door opened. Maren sat inside the doorway, one hand gripping the wheel of her chair. The nurse stood behind her. Color had returned to Maren's face, though her left arm still rested heavily against her side. I know now, she said. Elliot turned. You should be resting. I have been resting for 2 years. Maren, Mr. Reed's contract remains active. He disrupted your consultation. Yes, he has no medical qualifications. I have 30 medically qualified people who cannot tell me why my legs stopped working. Elliot lowered his voice. You are exhausted, and you are avoiding the question. Maren looked at Jonah. Repeat it. Jonah set down his case. When was the last time you had a full episode somewhere other than this property? Maren considered it. The first episode happened at Whitlock Research. After that. At the hospital. During admission or before you arrived? Before how long were you admitted? 11 days. Any episodes during those 11 days? Maren looked toward Elliot. He knew her records better than she did. No, he answered reluctantly. What happened after discharge? Jonah asked. Maren's hand moved over the brass bird. I came home. How soon before the next episode? 2 days. Doctor, Renner appeared in the library doorway. Environmental patterns were considered, he said. Jonah turned. What was tested? Common toxins, heavy metals, infectious exposures, food triggers, medication reactions. At the hospital, blood and urine samples were collected there. How many hours after she left this house? Doctor. Renner's expression became less patient. Most samples were taken following acute events. After paramedics gave her oxygen? Sometimes. How long was transport? That varies. Were environmental tests taken inside the house while an episode was happening? Dr. Renner glanced toward Elliot. Jonah had his answer. Maren saw it too. What exactly are you inspecting? She asked. The estate's heating, ventilation, air purification, backup generation, humidity controls, combustion appliances, and emergency systems. Have you found anything? Not yet. You looked at the monitor during my episode. Yes. What did it show? A brief fluctuation. In what? I do not know yet. Elliot shook his head. This is speculation. Jonah agreed. Yes, the agreement surprised him. Jonah continued. Speculation is not evidence. Neither is assuming the house is safe because no one has proved it isn't. Maren looked down at the brass bird. It was small enough to close inside her palm, polished smooth from years of handling. What do you need? She asked. Access to every mechanical room, service record, renovation document, alarm history, and environmental control log for this property. How long? 4 days. You had 4 days already. I had 4 days to satisfy an insurer. That is different from finding out whether your house is poisoning you. The words landed harder than Jonah intended. Maren's expression became flat. Doctor, Renner stepped forward. That language is irresponsible. Then prove it wrong. Elliot pointed toward the hall. This conversation is over. Maren looked at him. No, Maren. Give Mr. Reed access. You are making a medical decision based on a contractor's question. I am making a building decision based on a building contractor. He is an air system inspector. Jonah corrected him. Industrial environmental technician. Elliot ignored him. Maren did not. 4 days, she said. You will report directly to me. I need unrestricted access. You will have it. Even if Mr. Blaine objects? Maren's gaze remained on Jonah. Especially then. Jonah returned the next morning at 6:30. Whitlock House occupied 12 acres outside Pittsburgh, hidden behind stone walls, winter trees, and a long road that curved uphill toward a mansion built in 1911. The original house contained thick stone walls, coal fireplaces, narrow service corridors, and iron heating ducts that had been abandoned decades earlier. Newer systems had been layered over the old ones. Radiant floors beneath imported tile, a geothermal loop below the lawn, gas boilers in the basement, a whole house purification system installed after Maren became ill, pressure-controlled medical ventilation in her bedroom suite, backup generators beneath the east terrace, smart sensors in almost every room. It was the kind of property designed by people who believed enough technology could eliminate uncertainty. Jonah had seen simpler systems fail more honestly. The estate manager, Harold Pritchard, met him in the main hall. Harold had worked for the Whitlock family for 31 years. He wore a brown suit, carried an old ring of keys, and looked at Jonah as though contractors belonged near service entrances. Mr. Blaine requested that I accompany you, Harold said. Miss Whitlock gave me unrestricted access. You will have access. Accompanied access is restricted. Harold's mouth tightened. This is a private residence, and possibly a hazardous one. You should be careful repeating that claim. I have not made a claim. You told Miss Whitlock the house might be poisoning her. I told her we need to find out. Harold selected a key. The mechanical rooms are downstairs. Jonah inspected the main boilers first. They were 6 years old, professionally installed, and recently serviced. The combustion readings were clean. The flues were intact. The carbon monoxide detectors worked. Harold watched Jonah reset each alarm. Everything is maintained, he said. Who maintains it? Voss Climate Systems. Same company for all 6 years? Yes. Who selected them? Mr. Blaine. Jonah wrote it down. The geothermal system was operating within range. The backup generators had no visible leaks. The kitchen appliances tested normally. The fireplaces were old but lined correctly. By noon, Jonah had found 14 maintenance concerns. None explained Maren's symptoms. He tested the library where she had collapsed. The air was clean. He inspected the soot above the fireplace. Old residue. He checked the portable monitor. Normal. At 1 in the afternoon, Maren summoned him to her office. Her private office occupied a glass-enclosed room overlooking the eastern gardens. The space had once been a conservatory. The original stone floor remained beneath a raised wooden platform designed for her wheelchair. Tropical plants stood along the windows, though several leaves had turned yellow. A brass bird sat beside Maren's computer. Jonah noticed a second oxygen machine near the wall. You have found nothing, she said. I have found several things. Nothing relevant. Not yet. Maren moved a document toward him. My complete episode history. Jonah did not touch it. I am not qualified to read medical files. You asked when and where the episodes occurred. I need dates, locations, and environmental conditions, not private examinations. The dates are inside. Then have someone extract them. You are concerned about my privacy? Yes, that makes one of us. The bitterness in her voice had not been directed at Jonah. He looked toward the gardens. What happened at Whitlock Research? A fall. Mr. Blaine said that. He enjoys concise explanations. What caused the fall? My legs stopped responding. That was the first episode? The first major one. What were you doing? Inspecting a prototype assembly line. Which building? Research Hall 2. What kind of ventilation? I do not know. What materials were being used? Medical-grade polymers, adhesives, lubricants, standard fabrication compounds. Any fire, spill, or alarm? No. Did anyone else become ill? No. Did symptoms begin suddenly? Maren stared at him. You are asking medical questions. I am asking location questions. She looked down at her right hand. There had been headaches. For how long? A few weeks. Only at work? I worked most of the time. Did they improve at home? I don't remember. What happened after the fall? I could not stand. My speech became slow. I lost vision in my left eye for several minutes. And the hospital found? Nothing that explained it. Did your strength return? Partly. How long? 3 days. Then you came here. Yes, and the episodes continued. Yes, Jonah looked around the conservatory office. How much time do you spend in this room? 12 hours a day. Every day? Most. Do symptoms happen more here? I have never counted. Start. Maren's eyes hardened. I have already spent 2 years recording symptoms. Doctors asked what happened. I need you to record where. She leaned back. You speak as if everyone else was incompetent. No, then what are you saying? That people can be excellent at answering the question they were trained to ask and still miss the one they were not. Something moved behind her expression. What question did they miss with your wife? She asked. Jonah became still. Maren noticed. I read the insurance background report. You read about my wife? I read about you. That is different, is it? Jonah looked toward the yellowing plants. My wife's name was Rachel. Maren waited. She died 5 years ago. I know. She was 32. She had been tired for weeks. Shortness of breath. Chest pain twice. The clinic called it anxiety. The emergency department called it a muscle strain. What was it? A blood clot. Maren's expression softened by an amount most people would have missed. Jonah did not. She collapsed in our kitchen, he said. The paramedic asked whether she had been on a long flight. She had not. She had driven 11 hours 2 weeks earlier to see her mother. No one counted driving as immobility because the standard question was about flying. Maren looked down. One question. One different word. Would it have saved her? I don't know. It was the answer Jonah had spent 5 years refusing to decorate. He did not know. He never would. But you keep asking, Maren said. Yes, because of her? Because patterns do not care who notices them. Maren picked up the brass bird. My grandfather carried this when he worked underground. In a mine? Steel country coal. Before the family had money. Why a brass bird? He said the real birds were too important to turn into decorations. Jonah looked at the polished wings. A canary. A reminder. Of danger? Of paying attention before everyone else realizes something is wrong. The irony seemed to reach both of them at the same time. Maren put the bird down. Find the pattern, she said. Jonah worked until nearly midnight. He mapped every known episode by room. The records were incomplete, but a shape emerged. 9 occurred in Maren's conservatory office, 7 in the library, 5 in her bedroom, 3 in the eastern hallway, 2 in vehicles immediately after she left the property, 1 at Whitlock Research, none during hospital admission, none during a 10-day rehabilitation stay in Arizona, none during a 4-day medical conference in Boston, although Maren reported headaches there. Jonah called her from the basement archive. You spent 10 days in Arizona? 18 months ago. No major episodes? No, how did you feel? Tired? Could you stand? With support. What happened when you returned? I collapsed the next morning. Jonah stared at the map. Where did you spend the evening? My office. Did anyone test the house after that episode? Elliot arranged a complete environmental inspection. Who performed it? Voss Climate Systems. The same company maintaining every combustion appliance. When? The following afternoon. Jonah looked at the service reports. Each one showed perfect readings. Too perfect. Not one variation, not one minor fault. Real buildings produced imperfect data. Even healthy systems changed with wind, temperature, occupancy, and pressure. Voss Climate's reports looked copied. Jonah photographed the pages. The following morning, his daughter called before school. Dad, my coat zipper broke. Jonah balanced the phone between his shoulder and ear while crawling beneath an air handling unit. Use the blue one. It is too small. It fit last month. My arms grew. Only your arms? My whole body, probably. Jonah smiled. Tessa was 8 and spoke with the confidence of someone who had not yet discovered how often adults invented certainty. Wear the red jacket today, he said. It has Rachel's name inside. Jonah stopped moving. The red jacket had belonged to his wife. Tessa wore it only when she needed to feel close to a mother she remembered mostly through photographs. It is okay to wear it. I know. A pause. Are you fixing the sick lady's house? I am trying. Is she mean? She is tired. That means yes. It means she has spent 2 years being treated like a question no one can answer. Maybe people ask bad questions. Jonah closed his eyes. You need to go to school. Mrs. Donnelly said I can bring my weather station Friday. That is good. It measures carbon dioxide, and wetness, humidity, and bad air. What kind of bad air? All of it. That is ambitious. Maybe I can help you. Jonah smiled. You are already helping. After the call, he inspected the air handler above Maren's office. The filters were new. The fan was balanced. The ducts were clean. But the pressure controls were unusual. The conservatory wing operated under slight negative pressure. That meant air was constantly being pulled into it from surrounding spaces. In hospitals, negative pressure kept contaminated air from escaping isolation rooms. In a house, it could pull air from wall cavities, fireplaces, basements, or service shafts. Jonah followed the pressure map. The conservatory pulled replacement air through an old vertical chase running from the sub-basement to the roof. The chase had once served the original coal furnace. It should have been sealed. The renovation plans marked it closed. Jonah removed a wall grill. Cold air moved across his hand. The chase was open. He lowered a probe. The readings were normal. Then the heating system activated. The number rose. Not enough to trigger an alarm. Then fell. Jonah waited through another cycle. The reading rose again. A faint carbon monoxide signal. 3 parts per million. Then 5. Then 2. Low. Below the threshold of most residential alarms. Not enough to explain everything. But it was something. Jonah traced the chase to the sub-basement. Behind a locked steel door sat the original boiler room. Harold refused to open it. That room was decommissioned 40 years ago. Air is moving through it. The chase is sealed. It is not. There is nothing inside. Then opening it should not be a problem. I do not have authorization. Jonah called Maren. She answered during a board meeting. What? I need access to the original boiler room. Why? Air from that room is entering your office. Harold says it is sealed. Harold is wrong. There was a short silence. Put him on. Harold took the phone. He listened. His face changed. Then he removed a black iron key from the oldest part of his ring. The door opened reluctantly. The smell inside was not strong. Dust, damp stone, old metal. Jonah switched on his lights. The original coal boiler had been removed. Modern water pipes crossed the ceiling. Electrical conduits ran along one wall. At the far end stood a smaller gas-fired furnace. It was operating. Jonah stared at Harold. You said this room was decommissioned. The furnace serves the greenhouse. Which greenhouse? The Eastern Conservatory. Maren's office. Harold's expression became defensive. It was installed during the renovation. Why is it not on the mechanical plans? It is supplemental. Who services it? Voss. Jonah approached the furnace. Its flame burned yellow. The exhaust pipe disappeared into the old chimney chase. Jonah tested the surrounding air. 7 parts per million. Then 12. Then 4. Still intermittent. He inspected the heat exchanger through the service opening. A thin crack ran along the metal seam. The furnace cycled off. The reading dropped. Jonah photographed everything. Shut it down, he said. Harold stepped forward. You cannot. It is leaking combustion gas. The conservatory plants will freeze. Turn it off. You require Miss Whitlock's approval. Jonah reached for the emergency switch. Harold caught his wrist. Do not touch that. Jonah looked at the hand. Harold released him. Who told you not to shut it down? Jonah asked. No one. Then why are you protecting it? I am protecting the house. From what? Before Harold could answer, Elliot entered the boiler room. He wore no coat despite the cold. What are you doing? He asked. Jonah pointed toward the furnace. Cracked heat exchanger. Improper flue connection. Combustion gas entering the old chase. Elliot looked at Harold. Is that true? Harold's face had become pale. The readings have always remained within permitted levels. Jonah turned sharply. You knew there were readings. Trace readings. How long? It was investigated. When? Last year. By Voss? Yes. What did they recommend? Harold did not answer. Elliot did. Replacement during the next renovation cycle. Jonah stared at him. You knew too. I knew there was a minor maintenance concern. A combustion leak is not a minor concern. The levels were below regulatory limits. Measured where? In the conservatory. During which operating cycle? I do not remember. Did anyone measure inside the chase? Elliot's face tightened. You are attempting to connect a low-level reading to a complex neurological condition. I am attempting to stop combustion gas entering her office. Maren's home has carbon monoxide alarms. Alarms designed to prevent acute death, not necessarily chronic exposure. Elliot stepped between Jonah and the switch. Do not shut down any system until an independent test confirms your conclusion. The system is unsafe. You are not authorized to make that determination. I was hired to make exactly that determination. You were hired to inspect. Jonah understood then. The difference mattered to Elliot. Inspection created reports. Determination created action. Elliot wanted paperwork, not change. Jonah turned off the furnace. The room became silent. Elliot's voice dropped. You have exceeded your authority. Probably you are finished here. Probably I will make sure no commercial insurer in this state hires you again. Jonah looked toward the cracked furnace. If that is the cost of turning it off, send the paperwork to my apartment. Maren's condition improved over the next 48 hours. Not dramatically. No miracle occurred. She remained weak. Her legs did not suddenly respond. The numbness in her hands continued, but she did not collapse. Her headache eased. Her speech remained clear. For the first time in months, she slept 6 uninterrupted hours. Jonah installed temporary monitors throughout the house. The readings stayed low after the furnace was shut down. Maren ordered everyone in the estate tested for carbon monoxide exposure. Most results were normal. Harold showed signs consistent with repeated low-level exposure, though less severe than Maren's. 2 housekeepers reported years of headaches they had blamed on stress. The estate's elderly dog, which slept near the conservatory, had been treated repeatedly for lethargy. The pattern widened. Dr. Renner remained cautious. Carbon monoxide could explain headaches, confusion, fatigue, and some neurological injury, he said. It does not automatically explain every symptom. I did not say it did, Jonah replied. Maren looked from the doctor to Jonah. Could repeated exposure worsen damage from the original event? It is possible, Dr. Renner said. Possible. We need neurological imaging focused on delayed hypoxic injury, occupational exposure consultation, and repeated environmental testing. Tests no one ordered before. We had no evidence of exposure. Jonah looked at the brass bird on Maren's desk. You had no evidence, because the source was shut down during scheduled inspections. Doctor. Renner turned. What? Jonah had compared the furnace logs with the Voss inspection reports. Every scheduled inspection occurred after the supplemental furnace had been disabled remotely. The system's smart controller contained a hidden maintenance mode. 6 hours before a technician arrived, the furnace shut off. Fresh air flushed the conservatory. After the inspection ended, the furnace restarted. The report showed clean readings because someone had designed them to. Maren looked toward Elliot. He was standing near the windows. Did you know about maintenance mode? She asked. All modern systems have inspection settings. That was not my question. Elliot glanced toward Harold. Harold looked down. Maren's voice became quieter. Did you know? I knew Voss managed the system remotely. Did you know they shut it down before testing? I knew the furnace was stabilized before technicians arrived. Stabilized, it prevented inconsistent readings. Jonah spoke. It prevented real readings. Elliot's control slipped. You are not a scientist. No, you found one damaged furnace and built a conspiracy around it. I found falsified conditions. There is no evidence the exposure caused her illness. Maren's gaze remained on Elliot. When did Voss first report the leak? He did not answer. Harold finally spoke. 14 months ago. Maren turned toward him. You knew for 14 months? The reading was low. What did they recommend? Immediate replacement. Elliot interrupted. They recommended replacement or ongoing monitoring. Jonah held up the report he had found inside the controller's archived files. The original language was clear. Immediate shutdown until the combustion system was repaired or replaced. Elliot had approved continued operation. Maren read the page. Her hands did not shake. That was worse. Why? She asked. The conservatory temperature had to remain stable. For the plants? For the medical equipment. Your rehabilitation team said cold made your symptoms worse. So you kept a leaking furnace running because you believed shutting it down might make me uncomfortable. The readings were not dangerous. Then why hide them? I did not hide them. You removed the recommendation from the maintenance summary. I simplified the report. You changed it. I was managing a crisis. Maren looked at him for a long time. Elliot had once been the person she trusted most. After her first collapse, he slept in hospital chairs, handled reporters, postponed meetings, and learned every medication schedule. When she returned home, he reorganized the company so she could lead remotely. Then, Slowly, his help became authority. He answered before she did, approved what she had not read, protected her from information he believed would upset her, controlled the conditions of her life while insisting he was preserving it. Leave, Maren said. Elliot looked at her. We have a board call in 20 minutes. You will not be on it. You cannot run the company in your present condition. My present condition may be partly connected to a system you chose not to shut down. That is unproven. So is your loyalty. The word struck. Elliot's face hardened. This contractor is using your desperation. Jonah said nothing. Maren looked toward him. Jonah did not defend himself. That mattered. Elliot continued. He asked one lucky question. Now you are prepared to destroy the company and your relationships because you want an answer so badly. Maren's fingers closed over the brass bird. I do want an answer. That does not make this one correct. No. She placed the bird on the desk. But you knew there was a question. Security escorted Elliot from the estate. By the end of the week, the first official environmental report arrived. It was inconclusive. The furnace had been shut down before the certified investigators came. Current air readings were normal. Surface samples revealed no unique contaminant. Archived smart home data showed fluctuations, but did not directly record carbon monoxide in the conservatory, because the installed sensors measured only acute thresholds. The medical review was equally cautious. Maren's imaging showed signs that could be consistent with previous hypoxic injury. They could also reflect unrelated changes. Her blood tests were normal. Her carboxyhemoglobin level was normal because she had been away from the source for days. No physician would state with certainty that the furnace caused the entire condition. Elliot used that uncertainty. He called an emergency board meeting. Jonah learned about it when Maren's new attorney arrived at the estate carrying a petition for temporary executive incapacity. The board intended to remove Maren as chief executive until an independent medical panel declared her fit. Elliot claimed she had dismissed essential leadership, disrupted company operations, accused employees without proof, and granted sensitive access to an unqualified contractor. Jonah read his name on page 6. What does this have to do with me? He asked. Maren sat behind the desk in her conservatory office. The temporary heaters Jonah had installed hummed along the wall. The plants had been moved. The yellow leaves looked greener already. They are calling you evidence of impaired judgment, she said. Are they wrong? Maren looked up. Jonah continued. You hired a man with a failing business, no medical degree, and $83 in his account to investigate a condition 30 doctors could not explain. You had $91 when I hired you. Rent cleared. Something almost like amusement appeared in her face, then disappeared. The board votes in 5 days, she said. What happens if you lose? Elliot becomes interim chief executive. And the furnace investigation? Controlled by company counsel. Meaning buried. Meaning delayed until it becomes irrelevant. Jonah looked toward the old brass bird. What do you want me to do? Prove it. I cannot prove a medical diagnosis. Prove the exposure. The furnace is off. Then recreate the conditions. That would mean running a damaged combustion system. In a controlled test. No. Maren's expression hardened. You said the system caused the readings. I said the system was unsafe. Then demonstrate it. I will not fill part of your house with carbon monoxide to save your position. The wing is empty. No, we can use remote instruments. No, you work for me. My contract was terminated by Elliot. I reinstated it. Then you can terminate it again. Maren turned her chair away. I need evidence. So do I. Then why are you refusing to collect it? Because evidence gathered by repeating the danger is not worth creating another victim. No one will be inside. You will insist on watching. I am capable of deciding where I sit, and I am capable of refusing to turn on a cracked furnace. Maren stared at him. For several seconds, Jonah thought she would dismiss him. Instead, she asked, what would you do if it were Tessa? The question was cruel. Maren knew it the moment she said it. Jonah's face changed. He closed the equipment case. I would remove her from the house. Maren's voice softened. Jonah, I would not keep her inside a place that might be hurting her, because leaving felt like surrender. The words remained between them. Maren looked toward the glass walls of the conservatory. This room had been her command center for 2 years. Her desk, her screens, her medical equipment, her view of the company she no longer visited. She had treated staying as strength. Maybe it had been exposure. Maybe leaving was not surrender. Maybe it was the first honest test. What are you suggesting? She asked. Move out. For how long? 2 weeks. I have not left this property overnight except for hospitals and medical travel. That is the point. My equipment can move. My staff can work somewhere else. My board already thinks you are unstable. Maren's eyes narrowed. That was not encouraging. It was practical. Where? Jonah thought of the most controlled environment available. The Whitlock research residence. Maren's face changed. No. Why? That is beside the facility where I first collapsed. The original building is closed. The executive residence is half a mile away and uses an independent mechanical system. No. You asked for evidence without recreating the exposure. I said no. Then choose a hotel. No. A rehabilitation center. No. Anywhere outside this house. I will not be driven from my home by a theory. Jonah leaned toward her, then stopped treating the location as neutral. Maren's fingers pressed against the chair rims. This house belonged to my parents. It also has a cracked furnace. I built my company from this room after the fall. You survived from this room. That is the same thing. No, the answer came too quickly, too clearly. Maren looked at him as though he had struck the table. Jonah lowered his voice. Surviving is what you did because you had no other choice. Building requires choosing where you go next. Maren turned toward the brass bird. What if I leave and nothing changes? Then we know. What if I improve? Then we know something else. What if I improve and return and become sick again? Jonah did not soften the answer. Then the house is part of the pattern. Maren looked at him. And if I do not improve at all? Then I keep looking. It was the first promise he had made her. Not that she would recover. Not that he could solve her. Only that he would continue looking. Maren left Whitlock House the following morning. The move took 7 hours. Medical equipment. Workstations, medication storage. Backup power. Mobility devices. Security arrangements. Files, clothing. Her staff treated it like an evacuation. Maren treated it like defeat. Jonah met them at the executive residence near Whitlock Research. It was a modern single-story building surrounded by bare trees and old manufacturing structures. Everything was accessible. Wide doors, level floors, low controls, fresh mechanical systems. Maren hated it immediately. It looks like a hospital designed by an architect who feared color. It has clean air, Jonah said. That is not a color. Tessa arrived that afternoon because Jonah's childcare arrangement failed. Maren objected until Tessa entered carrying a cardboard weather station, 3 notebooks, and the red jacket that had belonged to her mother. What is that? Maren asked. My air lab. You are 8, almost 9. That does not answer the question. Tessa placed the cardboard box on the table. It measures carbon dioxide, temperature, humidity, and some bad air. Some? The sensor was $18. Jonah removed his coat. She is managing expectations. Tessa looked at Maren's brass bird. Is that a canary? Made of brass. Real canaries told miners when the air was bad. I know. Did yours tell you? Maren looked at Jonah. He raised both hands. I did not teach her that for this conversation. Tessa picked up her sensor. Maybe it was trying. The first 3 days outside Whitlock House brought no dramatic change. Maren still needed the wheelchair. Her hands still became numb. She still woke with pain moving through her legs like an electrical storm. On the 4th morning, she realized she had not had a headache. On the 5th, she completed a 90-minute board call without losing words. On the 6th, Her left foot moved during therapy. Not a spasm. Not an accident. Leah asked her to repeat it. Maren did. Once, twice, the third attempt failed. Maren's face closed. Leah wrote the result down. Do not make it important. Maren said, it is data. 1 movement. 2, the third failed. 2 happened. Maren looked toward Jonah, who was adjusting the temporary monitoring station near the door. He did not smile. He did not congratulate her. He checked the reading and said, air is clean. Maren hated how grateful she felt. Tessa began spending afternoons at the residence. She did homework beside Maren's desk, built weather charts, and asked questions adults had learned not to ask. Were you always rich? No. When did you get rich? Slowly, then suddenly. Why don't you have kids? Maren looked up from her screen. Jonah nearly dropped a cable. Tessa. What? That is personal. She can say that. Maren watched the child. I was engaged. What happened? He preferred being needed to being loved. Tessa considered this. What does that mean? It means he liked making decisions for me. Dad makes decisions for me. You are 8, almost 9. Maren's mouth shifted. Tessa saw it. Was that a smile? No. It was. Finish your mathematics. Tessa leaned toward Jonah. She smiled. I saw nothing. Maren looked at him. He continued working. The wall between them began to change, not break. Maren's walls did not fall because a man and child brought warmth into a room. They changed because neither of them tried to climb over them. Tessa knocked. Jonah waited. Maren opened small doors when she chose. On the 8th day, the official medical team repeated neurological testing. Maren's speech processing had improved. Her attention scores increased. The constant tremor in her right hand had decreased. Muscle activation appeared in parts of her left leg that had shown almost no response 6 months earlier. Dr. Renner remained cautious. The improvement is meaningful, he said, but we cannot attribute it entirely to environmental change. What can you attribute it to? Maren asked. Reduced exposure may be one factor. Better sleep, altered medication timing, increased therapy engagement, reduced stress. Reduced stress? Maren looked around the temporary residence filled with lawyers, monitors, staff, and an approaching board vote. Doctor, Renner adjusted his glasses. Different stress. Jonah almost smiled. Maren noticed. Do not encourage him, she said. The evidence still was not enough. Elliot's attorneys argued that Maren's improvement proved the condition was psychological. They claimed the new setting reduced anxiety. The environmental results remained circumstantial. The board vote was 48 hours away. Jonah returned to Whitlock House with 2 independent engineers. They inspected the furnace. The crack was undeniable. The flue connection violated installation requirements. The negative pressure system pulled combustion gases directly toward Maren's office. But because the furnace remained off, they could model the exposure only mathematically. Elliot's lawyers would call it theoretical. Jonah needed historical evidence. He searched the smart home archive again. Temperature, fan speeds, pressure, furnace cycles, window sensors. Nothing recorded carbon monoxide continuously. Then Tessa asked a question. Why do the plants know? Jonah looked up from the screen. Tessa was studying photographs of Maren's conservatory. What? The plants turned yellow. Plants turn yellow for many reasons. But they got better after you moved them. Jonah opened the greenhouse maintenance records. The plants had begun yellowing 15 months earlier. The estate horticulturist had reported unexplained leaf damage, slowed growth, and repeated loss of sensitive species. Voss Climate attributed it to humidity. Jonah searched photographs by date. The damage followed the supplemental furnace's winter cycles, worse in cold weeks, better in summer. Maren's major episode showed the same seasonal pattern. Jonah overlaid the data. The lines nearly matched, not proof, but stronger. Then he noticed something else. Whitlock House contained a network of indoor security cameras. Most were visual only. The conservatory used a high-end archival system with thermal imaging because Maren often reviewed confidential physical prototypes there. Thermal footage showed heat patterns. It also showed the furnace cycling. Jonah watched the night before Maren's worst episode. The conservatory pressure fan activated. Minutes later, a warm plume appeared along the old chimney wall. It spread across the room. Maren sat at her desk for 5 hours inside it. Jonah called the camera manufacturer. The system also stored air density calibration data to correct image distortion. The data was not designed as an environmental monitor, but unusual combustion gases changed the calibration values. The archive contained 2 years of indirect exposure records. Cold weather, furnace activation, air density change, plant damage, Maren symptoms. The pattern aligned. Jonah brought the data to Dr. Renner and the independent engineers. Neither would call it perfect proof. Together they called it compelling evidence. The board meeting took place at Whitlock Research. Elliot expected Maren to join by video. She arrived in person. Jonah walked beside her chair. Tessa remained in the residence with Leah, though she had placed the brass bird in Maren's hand before she left. For luck, Tessa said. I do not believe in luck. For air then, Maren carried it into the boardroom. 21 directors sat around the table. Elliot occupied the chair beside the empty chief executive position. Maren stopped opposite him. You are in my seat. Elliot looked at the wheelchair, then caught himself. The mistake had already happened. Maren saw it. So did everyone else. He stood. Maren positioned her chair at the head of the table. The incapacity motion was introduced. Elliot spoke first. He described declining performance, disrupted leadership, damaged internal trust, and an unproven accusation against a respected contractor. He called Jonah's investigation reckless. He called Maren vulnerable. Then he called the proposed leadership change temporary. Maren waited until he finished. She did not defend her strength. She did not promise recovery. She did not claim certainty where none existed. She presented the records, the cracked furnace, the altered maintenance recommendation, the inspection mode, the negative pressure pathway, the plant damage, the thermal plume, the air density archive, the medical improvement following relocation. Then Dr. Renner spoke. We cannot state that chronic combustion exposure explains every element of Miss Whitlock's condition. We can state that repeated exposure likely occurred, that such exposure can cause serious neurological injury, and that removing her from the environment has coincided with measurable improvements. Elliot leaned forward. Coincided, yes, doctor, Renner said. Medicine often begins by respecting coincidence long enough to test it. Jonah looked at him. The 30th doctor had finally changed his question. The board's attorney presented the original Voss report. Immediate shutdown recommended. Elliot's authorization appeared beneath it. Continued monitored operation approved. A director asked Elliot why he had removed the warning from Maren's summary. He called it an administrative decision. Another asked why inspections were conducted only after the furnace entered maintenance mode. He blamed the contractor. Another asked why Maren had not been informed. Elliot's answers became longer, then weaker. Finally, Maren spoke. Mr. Blaine's argument is that I cannot lead because my judgment became impaired. No one interrupted. For 14 months, he withheld evidence that the environment in which I lived and worked might be damaging my health. Elliot shook his head. That is not accurate. Maren continued. He says he did it to protect me from unnecessary fear. I protected you from unverified information. You protected your authority. That is unfair. No. It is precise. Maren placed the brass bird on the table. My grandfather carried the memory of miners who trusted a living creature to warn them when the air changed. He gave me this because he believed leadership meant noticing danger before it became obvious. She looked around the boardroom. I failed to notice. Her admission changed the room. Elliot had expected denial. The board had expected a defense of perfection. Maren gave them responsibility. I allowed my company and my home to become systems in which difficult information moved upward only after someone made it comfortable. I rewarded people who simplified warnings. I confused control with competence. She looked toward Jonah. One contractor asked where my symptoms happened. Then back at the board. That question did not diagnose me. It did something more basic. It returned context to a case everyone had reduced to my body. Maren rested her hands on the chair rims. You are being asked to decide whether my disability makes me incapable of leadership. That is the wrong question. She allowed the silence to hold. The correct question is whether I am willing to confront the systems that failed, including the ones I created. The board voted. Elliot was removed as chief operating officer pending an independent investigation. The incapacity motion failed. Maren remained chief executive by 3 votes. There was no applause, no triumphant music, no dramatic collapse from the man who had tried to replace her. Elliot gathered his papers. At the door, he stopped beside Maren. I loved you, he said quietly. Maren looked at him. I know. I was trying to keep everything from falling apart. You decided I was part of everything. His face tightened. That is not what I meant. It is what you did. Elliot left. Maren remained in the emptying boardroom. The victory had cost more than she expected. Jonah began gathering the monitors. You were right, she said. He looked up. About leaving the house. I said we would learn something. You knew. No, you believed it. That is different. Maren rolled toward the windows. Snow had begun falling across the research campus. What happens now? She asked. You replace the furnace. I meant medically. I don't know. The answer was plain. It did not comfort her. It did not betray her either. The doctors believe some damage may be permanent, she said. They might be right. They believe recovery could take years. They might be right. They may never be able to prove exactly what caused everything. They might be right about that too. Maren turned. You are terrible at reassurance. I am not reassuring you. What are you doing? Staying with the facts. And if the facts are not enough? Jonah looked at the brass bird in her hand. Then we decide where you want to go with what remains. Maren's eyes held his. The house is closed for remediation. Yes, I need somewhere to work. The research residence is available. I hate it. Yes, Tessa left cardboard equipment across the dining room. It is a laboratory. She wrote, do not breathe near sensor on my financial report. She takes contamination seriously. Maren looked toward the door. Will she be there tonight? If Mrs. Donnelly agrees. I was asking whether you will bring her. Jonah understood the distinction. Yes, Maren nodded. Good, the medical recovery was slow. There was no morning when Maren woke and found the past 2 years erased. Some symptoms improved quickly. The headaches disappeared. Her speech remained steady. The episodes of total weakness became less frequent, then stopped. Other damage remained. Neurological rehabilitation became part of every day. Not a punishment. Not a performance. Work, Maren regained stronger movement in her left leg. Her right side responded less consistently. She learned to stand inside a support frame for 30 seconds. Then 50. Then 2 minutes. Some weeks brought progress. Others took it back. Jonah did not count unless she asked him. Tessa counted everything. 74 seconds, she announced one afternoon. Maren lowered herself into the chair. I told you not to count aloud. I counted quietly. You announced the result. After, Maren looked toward Jonah. This is your fault. Probably, the brass bird moved from Maren's temporary desk to a new environmental laboratory at Whitlock Research. Maren created the Whitlock Context Initiative. Its first project developed low-level exposure monitors designed to track patterns over weeks rather than waiting for acute danger. The system combined air quality changes with location, time, temperature, equipment cycles, and voluntary symptom records. It did not diagnose disease, it asked better questions. Where were you when symptoms began? What changed before they worsened? When did they improve? What environment did every event share? Jonah became Director of Environmental Systems. The title paid more than any job he had held. He still drove the old van for 6 months because he distrusted vehicles he had not repaired himself. Tessa received a new winter coat. She continued wearing Rachel's red jacket on difficult days. Maren never tried to replace the mother Tessa had lost. That was part of why Tessa trusted her. She listened to stories about Rachel. She kept a photograph of her near the laboratory's family table. When Tessa asked whether that was strange, Maren answered honestly. Only people who believe love has limited seating would find it strange. Jonah heard her from the doorway. That evening, after Tessa fell asleep in the residence's guest room, Jonah found Maren beside the windows. Snow covered the research campus. The old building where she first collapsed stood dark in the distance. "You are leaving tomorrow," Maren said. Jonah leaned against the wall. "For 2 days. To inspect the Ohio facility." "Yes." "Tessa is staying with Mrs. Donnelly?" "Yes." Maren looked toward him. "She could stay here." Jonah did not answer immediately. "With the staff," Maren added. "Of course." "And Leah." "Obviously there are 3 security officers. You have constructed an excellent legal defense." Maren's hands moved over the chair rims. "I am not asking to replace anyone. I know. I am asking because the residence is quiet when she is gone." Jonah crossed the room. "Tessa would like that. I was not asking what Tessa would like." He stopped beside her. "No?" Maren looked at the snow. "No." Jonah waited. Her voice became quieter. "I was asking whether you trust me with something that matters to you." He looked at her. "Yes." The answer came without conditions. Maren closed her eyes briefly. For a woman who had controlled companies, contracts, laboratories, and thousands of employees, receiving trust was harder than commanding it. Jonah touched her hand. She did not pull away. Their first kiss happened weeks later, quietly, in the environmental laboratory after everyone else had left. No board members, no doctors, no promises about what her body would do. Only 2 people who had learned that uncertainty did not make connection dishonest. A year after Jonah asked the question in the library, Whitlock House reopened. The leaking furnace was gone. The old chimney chase was sealed. Continuous low-level monitors operated in every wing. Independent inspectors controlled the testing schedule. No system could enter maintenance mode without sending alerts to 3 separate offices. Maren returned for one evening, not to move back. Not yet. She entered the library where the 30th doctor had closed her file. Tessa placed the brass bird on the table. Jonah opened the windows despite the cold. Maren rolled toward the fireplace. The soot mark had been cleaned from the wall. She looked at the place where the doctors had sat. "They called the case impossible," she said. "They were describing their answer," Jonah replied. "Not your case." 30 doctors. 30 versions of the same question. Maren looked at him. And 1 ventilation technician. Industrial environmental technician. "You correct that every time." "It is more accurate." Tessa groaned. "You both talk too much." Maren smiled openly now, not often. Enough, she reached for the support frame beside her chair. Jonah moved closer, but did not touch it. "Where are you going?" he asked. The question had become theirs, not whether she could, not whether she should. "Where?" Maren looked across the library toward the tall windows. To open them, she stood with support. Her left leg held. Her right trembled but remained beneath her. She moved slowly. Jonah stayed beside her without pulling. Tessa walked on the other side, carrying the brass bird. When they reached the window, Maren unlocked it and pushed. Cold evening air entered the room. Clean, sharp, real, she stood there for 12 seconds. Then she sat. No one called it a miracle. Miracles ask people to forget the work, the evidence, the losses, and the limits that remain. This was not a miracle. It was a woman removed from an environment that had been hurting her. A medical team willing to reconsider what it had dismissed. A company forced to stop rewarding comfortable information. A child who believed cardboard could become a laboratory. And a broke single father who asked where the suffering happened before deciding what it meant. Jonah did not rescue Maren. He could not return the years she lost. He could not promise full recovery. He could not identify which symptom belonged to the furnace, which belonged to the first injury, and which might remain forever. Maren did not rescue Jonah either. She gave him work, but he brought value before she paid him. She gave Tessa security, but not a replacement for grief. What they gave each other was dignity. The right to be more than a case, more than a contractor, more than a disabled executive, more than a widower with overdue rent, more than the worst thing that had happened. 30 doctors had asked what was wrong with Maren Whitlock. Jonah Reed asked where it kept happening. That question did not contain the diagnosis. It opened the door through which the answer could finally enter. Because impossible cases are not always impossible. Sometimes the evidence has been divided into separate rooms. One person studies the body, another studies the building, another studies the records, another studies the machines. Everyone becomes certain inside their own small piece, and the truth waits in the hallway between them, waiting for someone to ask a question wide enough to connect it all.